On the Track is a web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
Go. So, Jeff, you've been on your travels, haven't you? Aye, that I have. And what you've been doing and where you've been going? Well, I went over to Finland, and then I took a pee. Yeah. And then I went over to Bulgaria, and I took a pee. Yeah, you did. Yeah, I did. And then I went to Croatia, and I took a pee. Yeah. And then I went to Italy, and I took a pee. Yeah. I've been incontinent.
That, I think, was our most geographical introduction yet. Well done to all involved.
I really like the old credits.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's Saturday afternoon, and it's 3 o'clock, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for On the Track. My name's John Dans. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and I'm your host for the next half hour as we explore the world of hard science, weird shit, and high strangeness. And you don't get much weirder than the story I'm going to tell you today. Our producer, Louis, who's known to everybody as Computer Boy...
Don't call me Computer Boy!
...has been trying to get me to, and I quote, make the titles of our shows more clickbaity, close quote. And I have to admit, I didn't really know what he meant, but I looked it up, and I thought, yes, well, I can probably do that. But unfortunately, the sort of stuff we cover in this show doesn't really go for clickbait. Exciting revelations about the discovery in 1941 of a new species of the Hesperidae in the Channel Islands. That's not really clickbaity, is it? But this episode, golly, it'd be very difficult to write a headline about it that wasn't clickbaity. Cop a load of this. I assume you all know who the Beatles were, but I'm afraid that is probably going to be a cue for dear Louis to interrupt.
John, young people don't need to know about the Beatles. Heck, we don't even listen to music. The last of our music-enjoying brain cells were killed off when we invented the Tide Pod Challenge, or planking, or that god-awful cinnamon challenge.
Well, I'm not going to pretend that I have any idea what Louis is talking about there, but if I've got to explain the Beatles to a generation who really don't know, I'm going to quote from Richard DeLeo, who in 1973 wrote an absolutely marvellous book, and a very funny book, called The Longest Cocktail Party, which told of his life as one of the members of the press office of Apple Corps Media Conglomerate, which was a company started and owned by the four Beatles. He worked as one of the press officers, and there was a time, allegedly, that he had a phone call from one of the most prominent of the British daily newspapers with the question, "Hey, can you tell us what's happening with the Beatles?" And Richard DeLeo was so jaded and so tired and so pissed off that he allegedly said, and this is very allegedly, there are 4 of them, they come from Liverpool and they've made a few records, and then he put the phone down. Luckily, the CFZ press office, which consists of me, Lilith and V, are much better at this than at customer... what do you say when you're being polite to people on the phone, V?
I don't know, I so rarely am.
Yeah. We really are professional here, aren't we, guys?
That's not really me, is it, though? It's the opposite of the truth, isn't it?
Well, I can't actually remember what the bloody word is when somebody phones up and you don't just say that's a fucking stupid question and put the phone down on them when you're actually polite and it's cool.
Cordial.
Cordiality, that's it, customer and professional cordiality. That's what we are, aren't we, V?
Yeah.
See?
I should get credit for that because I got the word.
Yes.
Hey.
You are going to get a credit. I'm going to put you into the, whatever it is you call it with subtitles machine now. Okay, so we've established that the Beatles were a very popular beat combo from the 1960s. But what's that got to do with fortean zoology, or indeed any of the other stuff that we mention on this show? Well, it's actually rather intriguing. Regular viewers will know that there are 2 things that really piss Richard Freeman off. One is when people, especially in Hollywood movies, portray dragons as having only 2 legs. And the other is when people, especially in Hollywood movies, portray the yeti as having a white fur. Dragons with 2 legs are called wyverns, and yetis have been reported in all sorts of different colours, but not with white fur. Now, Richard and I have always been very interested in where popularly believed ideas come from, and we've been looking for years to try to find the earliest account of a yeti being portrayed with white hair. And now this, ladies and gentlemen, you ain't gonna believe, because this is where the Beatles come in. The Beatles were an overnight success in 1963 after their second single, called Please Please Me, which, believe it or not, was about blowjobs, but nobody knew about that until about 40 years later. Please Please Me was a #1 hit, and the rest is history. The Beatles became the biggest act in the world, played music everywhere, came out with a string of albums and singles, which were all massive hits. But on top of that, their manager, Brian Epstein, who'd always wanted to be some sort of a theatrical impresario, and I'm not even going to ask V or Louis what an impresario is, because they're just going to make some stupid comment saying that it sounds like a skin disease or something. Yes, V? What do you... Okay, V's here. What do you think an impresario is, V?
It's the epitome of Ken Worthington.
Exactly, it's the epitome of Ken Worthington. Ken Worthington's an internationally known impresario who is the manager and best friend of John Shuttleworth. Who's John Shuttleworth? Well, you're going to have to wait to another show for that.
He's our
Because
buddy, isn't he?
he's our buddy. I've interviewed him, V's met him. He is a very talented man. But...
Oh, Graham.
Stop!
Sorry.
You're sending me down more and more bloody rabbit holes, V. Just shut up and let me finish telling this story about the Yeti.
Oh, yes. Go on. Go for it.
Well, Brian Epstein, who was homosexual in a time when homosexuality was illegal, and had very theatrical ambitions, wanted to be a theatrical impresario like Ken Worthington, and so he booked one of the big London theatres in Christmas 1963, and they had presented what was called the Beatles Christmas Show, which was a mixture of comedy skits, the band playing a few songs here, a few songs there, and then eventually a whole set, and other bands who are on, and musicians who are on the books of Brian Epstein's talent agency, also playing alongside, and the whole thing was compared by a then famous comedian who I can't remember. It was such a success that he decided to do exactly the same thing next year. And so, in Christmas 1964, there was something called another Beatles Christmas show at the building which was still then the Hammersmith Odeon, and which now, I can't remember what the hell it's called now. It was sold to a bunch of Arabs, and now it's somebody else, I think, so I don't know. But the Beatles 1964 Christmas show, the second Christmas show, was not quite as much as a success because the Beatles had moved on, as had their audience, and the thought of a show when they sort of just fart about with silly comedy skits, especially when the whole thing was presented by, guess who? Jimmy Savile, who even then nobody liked, really wasn't as important as it could have been in the eyes of the population. But there was only one comedy skit that year, and I wonder if you can see what's wrong with it. It was that the Beatles somehow found themselves in Antarctica chasing the Abominable Snowman. And the Abominable Snowman was played by an abominable DJ, Jimmy Savile.
That's right, and he killed them one by one, didn't he?
No, he didn't. I think you're thinking of something completely different, V.
No, he did. I read a thing where he said that he was in this thing with them, and he kept creeping up now and then I would kill them one by one. Now then, how's about that? Let's have your head off there, lad, eh?
V is very good at doing voices. I had no idea he could do Jimmy Savile, and I wasn't going to ask him to because I didn't think
I
of
wasn't
it.
wanted to channel that.
However, that to date is the earliest depiction of a yeti with white fur that we've been able to find.
It's not a fact.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing. So, boys and girls, unless you want the earliest white-furred yeti to actually turn out to be a massively vile serial child sex abuser, who I always thought was massively unwholesome, even back in the day. He always gave me the creeps, and apparently, according to the
more grader as well.
Yeah, and apparently, according to the Beatles, I don't know if this was many years after the event, but according to the well-attested line from the Beatles, which came in a show, which I'm going to show you a link to here, by the YouTube channel Parlogram Auctions, which is where I got this from. According to that, the Beatles all disliked him intensely.
Well, they would. He was a desiccated corpse for a garter.
On which point, I think we can go on to the next stage.
Sorry.
Regular viewers will remember that a few weeks ago I was contacted by a bloke called Michael, who I'd almost forgotten. but once upon a time he was a member of my band, John Downes and the Amphibians from Outer Space. And he asked me, amongst other stuff, were there any of the old songs, that's the ones that I'd written and recorded before we did our first properly recorded album, The Case, back in 1995, were any of the older songs still available, and had I got recordings of them? I'm afraid the answer is no, they're not still available, and although I've got recordings of some of them, I've lost most of the master tapes, and it doesn't really matter because they were terrible. They were really badly done on a crappy old Fostex X15, and I really didn't know what I was doing. They were appalling in quality, and I really wouldn't want anyone to hear them, even though I've lost half of them anyway. But I've been not in a very good way recently, and I've been having a bit of a mental health crisis, and to help me through it, for fun, if not for any other reason, I've been going over some of my old songs, and I've been re-recording them, mostly as a present for Michael, but also so I can put them in the show. This one's for you, Michael. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I want to take you back to the spring of 1996. It was a strange time, very different from today. John Major was still Prime Minister. Princess Diana was still alive, the IRA was still being the IRA, and I was still married to my first wife, and would be for another few months. I want to take you to a pub in Newton Abbot, which was, and may still be, called The Farmers, although I don't know, because I don't think I've ever been back in it since June 1986, a few months after the time I'm telling you about. But it was the cultural high spot of that part of Devonshire, and for some unaccountable reason, a band called John Downes and the Amphibians from Outer Space were very popular there. And guess who's on stage at the time? John Downes and the Amphibians from Outer Space. There's about 150 people in the audience sitting and watching the band, which featured some fat bloke with a guitar, that's me by the way, sitting in the middle of the stage going ding 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 ding, ding 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 ding. And I was flanked by two very beautiful girls, singers and dancers, who were going ooh, 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 ooh. And I'm not even going to attempt to reproduce what they were singing, but it was very mellifluous and beautiful. And there was a bass player called Marcus going dum 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 dum, and there was Dave the drummer going bum bum bum, keeping up a nice steady backbeat of about 100 beats per minute. And there was a guitarist called Pete, who was noodling happily away on the guitar while we kept this vibe going. And behind a large electric piano was a very strange young man called Big Jim Crawfish. I never did know why he changed his name to that, but it seemed appropriate at the time. And he was going plinkety plonk, and the whole vibe was really nice and cool. And I looked the audience in the eye, all 150 of them, and started to tell them a story. Because back in the spring of 1982, which is actually 40 years ago, pretty well today, I was in love. And I was in love in a way that, being a self-centered and arrogant young man, I thought that no boy had ever loved a girl like this before. And so I wanted to commemorate our love, and I sat down on acid whilst watching a Ken Campbell play, yes, the same one I told you about a few weeks ago, and I wrote a song which I thought was absolutely fucking fantastic. And I telephoned a guy called Jeff Hocking, who used to run, maybe still does, a recording studio at Weir Gifford, which is a little village just outside Bideford. And I got in my little car and I drove over to Weir Gifford and I recorded this song. And then, full of the feelings of accomplishment and lust, which the feeling of accomplishment brought on, I got in my little car again and drove all the way to Barnstaple, where the object of my affections lived. And I went up to her house and I went bang, 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 knocked on her door and she answered, which was jolly good because I didn't know what I was going to do if her mother answered. She answered and she said, "Oh, hi John, come on in." And I said, "I've written you a song, baby," being a sort of pretentious again little git that I was then. I probably weren't doing my best Barry White impression. "Hey, I've written you a song, baby. This is romance." And she looked at me with big blue come-to-bed eyes and she said, "A song? No one's ever written a song for little old me before. Come into my bedroom." And I really, really, really should have stopped there and let nature take its course. But again, as I've pointed out, I was an arrogant little bugger and I insisted on playing her the song. And so I reached into my trouser pockets, found the bulge and brought out a cassette tape in its cellophane wrappy thing. I opened it up, slowly took it out of its protective covering and put it into the little slit in the hi-fi that was glistening, waiting for it. And then I pressed my finger on the little red button. And as the music that you're hearing now came out over the speakers, I looked at the object of my desires, who shall remain nameless. I looked at the object of my desires and contemplated the delights that were to lie ahead. And when the song was over, she turned round, she looked at me and she said, "That's the biggest load of bloody rubbish I've ever heard in my life. Piss off and I never want to see you again." So I pissed off and I haven't ever seen her again, except for once in Barnstaple High Street about 12 years ago when I crossed to the other side of the road and hoped she didn't recognise me with a big bushy beard. But the song remains. I'm very fond of it. It's called Beautiful Mutant Monkey, and it goes a little bit like this. Beautiful mutant monkey, with peppermints on your smile. Your attitude stinks like the brain of the sphinx, or the eyes of a green crocodile. Beautiful mutant monkey, do they let you stay out on your own? My only mistake with the pictures I take was the dream on the blue telephone. Beautiful mutant monkey, I saw our Madonna and cried. You stand on your head, you pretend you're dead, with the man in the jar in your bag. Beautiful mutant monkey, do they let you stay out on your own? My only mistake with the pictures I take was the dream on the blue telephone. My only mistake with the pictures I take was the gleam on the blue telephone. Beautiful Mutant Monkey, do they let you stay out on your own? My only mistake with the pictures I take was the gleam on the blue telephone.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, wants me to remind you, always press the notification bell. Otherwise you won't be told when there's a new show to watch. And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it? So be it's the end of a week. I can never get my head around the fact that Sunday is the first day of the week. But it's Sunday afternoon and you, me and Archie have just finished recording another episode. I think it was a pretty good one this time, don't you?
Yes, indeed.
Well,
Marvellous.
marvellous. Absolutely excellent, dear boy. Absolutely excellent.
Splendid.
You know, I know that you and I both pretend to be Sir Henry Rawlins and End there, but it sounds just like my father and my Uncle Roger about 40 years ago.
Splendid, Rodder. Splendid.
My dear boy, we've come to the end of another show. What have we got to say to the boys and girls out there in viewerland?
Hello.
You've already said that.
I guess goodbye.
Yes.
Be seeing you.
Exactly what he said.